Morning, everyone. Single digit minus weather today, maybe even a +1. Imagine that. My heart goes out to the trees because they're not going to be very happy about that. I don't think. But anyways, we'll enjoy it while we can. I made a few announcements, and if I've sent you an email already regarding 100 elements, we're up to 19. So we can take 6 more people. Pat, you're on. And Heather and Kathy Payne. Anyone else that wants to go? The only thing I ask is that you be committed. I have to give exact numbers. Okay. And that's about it, I guess. Our guest this morning, of course, is Dr. Kelly Wallace. Kelly, for all the years you've been involved with Living Fit and Women 10, thank you so much. You just confirmed that we can keep on learning, and sometimes we hear the same information over and over again, but it doesn't stick, right? we got to hear it again. But I'm really looking forward to your presentation because there's always updates, I'm sure. So go ahead, Kelly. The topic is understanding weight loss. So.
All right. Well, let me just see if I can share my screen here. Oh.
Kelly, do you want people to, what's your preference, that people ask questions as you go along, or?
I would say, sure, that's fine. I will try, and there, is that working? You can see my screen?
Yes, absolutely. It's beautiful.
Perfect. All right. Yeah, if you want to ask things as you go along, that will mostly keep me on track, I hope. I tend to get too excited and run out of time, so we'll do our best. And I will try and keep an eye on the chat too if you want to put questions in there. But if I miss any, Harriet, please feel free to tell me about
I'll do my best to monitor that.
All right. Yeah, so I was really excited about this topic when I started diving into it because it's one we hear so much about, right? And especially as women, a lot of the marketing around this topic, I mean, there's a huge billion-dollar industry around weight loss. And a lot of it, to be honest, is, use whatever bad word you want, is just junk. And it's just trying to get people to sign on and make money for the people who are behind it. And that gets really frustrating for me because I feel like a lot of women are not getting the information and the services that they deserve. So we'll try and get into the nitty gritty of it today about what actually is important. There's a little bit about me. You guys pretty well know about me by now. So we'll jump through that. This is kind of the main take-home message, is that you can't change your weight without either changing the calories that are going into your body or that are going out of your body. That makes it sound really simple. It's not quite that simple. It's not just a math equation, but you do need to alter that calorie count one way or another if you're going to alter your weight. However, without changing the calories, you can certainly change things like your blood work, like your blood sugar or your cholesterol, or you can change the way you feel. Those things just by changing what's in the diet. So I really like this little diagram that kind of takes, well, what are the key factors that do impact weight and metabolism, and how do they interact? So we're going to go through each of those 5 areas in a little bit more detail here. So I started with the one that gets all the press, right? The energy intake or the diet. So that's basically the energy that is going into your body. So yeah, and when we actually really dive into the research on this, if the calorie content of a diet is equal, there is actually no diet that is better for weight loss than any other. So take a moment to think about that, because so say for me, if I wanted to lose some weight and I did all the calculations to figure out that for my, age and gender and size and activity level and all of those things that I need 1,800 calories a day. I'm just making up that number. And that would put me in a slight calorie deficit. If I got those 1,800 calories from a keto diet, or I got those 1,800 calories from a vegetarian diet, or I got those 1,800 calories from a McDonald's diet, it wouldn't matter as far as actual weight loss. But if those 1,800 calories make me feel terrible and I don't want to exercise and I'm stressed out and I actually can't stick with just eating those 1,800 because I'm starving all the time and I eat more, then obviously it's not going to work very well. So that's where these other factors come in. These different foods, or as we sometimes say, different macros, and we'll dive into what macros actually means in a minute. They affect your levels of hunger, your levels of satiety, the pleasure that you have in eating, how fast you eat, your energy levels, maybe your pain, maybe your sleep, maybe how you deal with stress, all of these things. And all of these things impact the rest of your lifestyle and how much you're going to move and what food choices you're going to make and the timing of when you're going to make those food choices. So, and then the other piece that's really important to me when I talk about weight loss with patients is that, again, because of this huge diet industry, especially in North America, it's present all over the world, but in North America in particular, it's bad, right? There are so many people who have suffered from disordered eating of some type, and may not be a full-on clinical diagnosis where you've actually had to seek medical treatment, but it may be just lurking in the background where you're not comfortable with your food and you feel a lot of shame around food. And I think as medical practitioners, we also have to be very careful not to feed into that. So it's still an area, of course, that I'm learning about, but I really try to have an honest conversation with my patients about where they're at, what their history is at, and what their, sort of relationship with food has been in the past. And ideally, if someone is looking to lose weight and I'm helping them with that, we want to look at, skills, education, knowledge, habits that are going to make this a lasting thing. That's not a fad diet that you're going to do for a month and then you're going to go right back to your old habits and your old weight. We know that doesn't work. We also know that overall health-wise, that is much worse for you. That some researchers are actually saying that on and off diet cycling can be just as detrimental for your health as smoking.
Hey, Kelly, I have a question. I actually raised my hand today.
Oh, yes, I see your hand there.
My first thought when I was looking at the slide was, it's kind of a, you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. Like, if you reduce your number of calories and you're feeling stressed, that's not good either.
No.
That's what I'm getting out of this too, is that you can still gain weight even if you reduce some of those calories.
Yeah,
because your body stress is probably the worst thing ever.
Yeah, and we'll get into a little bit more later, but if you reduce your calories dramatically, that will actually decrease your resting metabolism, and that can be permanent. So if somebody who's been over their lifetime has been on multiple really strict diets, they probably then have a very much lower kind of resting metabolism than they would have had otherwise, which then makes it much harder to lose weight down the road. So yeah, we'll get into that in a little bit. You're right. It is a very interesting phenomenon, and you want to be careful about it. And we know that the kind of the ideal, if somebody is wanting to lose weight, is just a very moderate calorie deficit between usually 300 to 500 calories a day below what their daily, just what they need in a day. Anything more than that generally sets you up for failure and other health consequences. And that it's ideally, if somebody's physically able, should be paired with exercise, because exercise will keep that resting metabolic rate higher. And then if you're just doing calorie restriction alone and no exercise, that will definitely decrease your resting metabolic rate. So let's go into these macros a little bit, because that's a pretty catchy word these days that I'm sure you've all heard. So macros is just short for macronutrients, and macronutrients being big nutrients. So there's 3 macros in the human nutrition world, there's protein, there's fat, there's calories. And macro just meaning we need these in large amounts every day versus the micronutrients like vitamin C and iron and all of those vitamins and minerals that you need in small amounts every day. So why are the macros important? Number one, because they're necessary for life. We need protein to help our muscles repair every day, for our immune system to function properly, for our bones, for all of our other connective tissue and skin. Protein is our building blocks. Fat can be for energy. Fat can also be to help us feel satiated or full after a meal. Fat is important for our nervous system. There is some fat around, your heart and your liver and your different organs to help cushion it so that when you're running and jumping, there's a little bit of protection there. Carbohydrates, the other one, is mainly just for energy. If we have extra carbohydrates, they can be stored as fat, but we don't really, other than energy, that's the main use for carbohydrates. So you'll see I've written some percentages there, and they're fairly wide percentages, but based on the best available evidence, in a healthy diet, you will have some of each of those in some percentage. And we can alter those proportions to affect how you feel, your cholesterol levels, your blood sugar, your inflammation. And that's where things like a keto diet or a low carb diet or a low fat diet, or those things will start to come into play. Protein is the one that's probably got the least amount of flexibility in it. You'll see their numbers as well, 1.2 to 1.5 grams per kilo of body weight. That's what the average person needs every day to just sustain their muscle mass and their bone density and their immune function and all of those things. That's the average person. If you're a high performance athlete, you probably need more protein in a day than that. If you're somebody who's in kidney failure, you probably need a little bit less protein than that. But for the average healthy person who's not, on their way to Beijing right now for the Olympics or something, in that range. So what I normally start with if I'm working with somebody with weight loss is we'll talk about what their goals are. We'll, go through some different calculations to figure out what their daily requirement of calories is. Then we'll subtract between that 300 to 500 to put them in that slight calorie deficit for weight loss. And then we'll calculate based on their current weight, how many grams of protein they need in a day. And then I will say, well, how much is that percentage wise of your daily intake? Okay. And that should be somewhere in that 15 to 30%. And we may adjust that a little and say, okay, well, we know that you're wanting to get into more exercise and you really like strength training. So let's bump that protein requirement a little bit. But there's less flexibility in there. You really shouldn't be eating a lot less protein than 1.2 to 1.5 grams per kilo of body weight a day. And like I said, you can be doing more if you're really active, but it's hard to do more. If you look at the amount, if you're, a weight training or you're bodybuilding or powerlifting or something, and you're trying to get 2 grams per kilo a day, that's a lot of protein. So most people don't really like eating that much. And then once I've figured out that percentage, and usually it's between 20 and 25% of the daily calories, then I adjust the fat and calorie percentages based on the person, on their goals, on what they've tried in the past and what's worked for them, on their lifestyle, sometimes even their culture, right? If I have somebody whose family is very traditionally Italian and they eat a lot of pasta, we're going to go a little higher on the carbohydrate percentage and a little bit lower on the fat percentage for them. Somebody who's tried a keto diet in the past and actually felt fairly good on it, we might go a little higher on the fat and a little bit lower on the carbohydrate percentage. But we're looking at that when we're making a plan for somebody. And then the next factor is this daily energy expenditure. And so this is where, what are you burning in a day? How much energy are you using? And that's what a calorie is a measurement of energy. So our daily energy expenditure basically comes from our movement, whether it's intentional movement, like you guys meeting for a walk later today and going for a walk, or whether it's not intentional, where it's just, me moving around the house, feeding the dog and putting the dishes away and whatever. All of those things add up. So yeah, our daily steps, our intentional exercise, even just change of position. And there's lots of evidence coming out now that somebody who sits at a desk as an office worker all day, um, better health benefits if you just get up and change position every now and then, um, and move around your office a little bit. And then strength exercise, so things like lifting weights, doing body strength exercises like push-ups and sit-ups and things, becomes really critical. And sarcopenia is something that doesn't get talked about enough. So we talk about osteopenia or osteoporosis a lot, right? Which is loss of bone density as we age. Sarcopenia is the equivalent for our muscles. So as we age, we also start losing muscle mass after the age of 30. Unless you are intentionally doing something to prevent that, you're going to be losing muscle mass. And you can see that it's pretty significant. Like after you turn 50, unless you're doing something to prevent it, you're losing about 1.5% of your muscle mass every year. After 60, it's 2.5–3% a year. And why is that important? Muscle is actually a metabolically active tissue. So it affects your metabolism, it affects your blood sugar control, it affects your cardiovascular health, it affects all sorts of things, your immune system. So we see that in people who do develop sarcopenia, yes, they're, the obvious things like they're weaker and they're more chance of falling, but also things like their immune system is lower, they have a lower resting metabolic rate, so they're not burning as many calories every day. They're more prone to things like pneumonia. This then leads to loss of independence at home, right? And most of us have a desire that we want to stay in our own homes as long as possible. So take good care of your muscles is my take home. And I think that you guys as a group have a head start on this because you do intentional exercise and intentional strength building exercise. But there's so many people, and especially as people get into their senior years, who just don't do that piece at all.
Kelly, I'm
Yeah.
thinking when you say after the age of 60, I think that it's really important to determine your biological age.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you have been active, and that's where if you are active and you are doing certain things, there's a difference between your chronological age and your biological age.
Yes, absolutely. And that, this sarcopenia would be a big factor in there, that somebody who's never been active and especially never done any strength type of activity would very likely have a much older biological age compared to their chronological age. And this becomes a big issue in our long-term care system, right? When we see things like COVID ripping through long-term care homes, part of the problem is that people who've been there have not been very active for a long time because there just aren't the resources in those living situations to get people out and active and doing those things. And so then the immune system is very weak. The independence is not there. The risk of falling, the risk of pneumonias, all of those things is just heightened. So that it is something that we need to talk about more and as we age. So that's sort of daily energy expenditure. Then we have our resting energy expenditure. And this is what most people think of as your metabolism when we use that word. So this is just the energy that is burned for your body just to be alive every day. Even if you just sat on the couch and did nothing, you're burning a certain amount of energy. The bigger you are, both in terms of muscle mass and in terms of just height and weight, you're going to have a higher resting energy expenditure because all tissue does need some energy. Muscle does tend to need more than fat. But even if you are carrying extra fat and you're just a 6'3" big person, you're going to have a higher resting energy expenditure than somebody who's 5'1". Our resting energy expenditure does decline with age. Part of that is just part of the aging process, but part of that is due to sarcopenia and losing this muscle mass. As I sort of touched on before, frequent dieting or extreme caloric restriction will decrease your resting energy expenditure. Caloric restriction alone without exercise to match it as well will decrease that resting energy expenditure. And that may be a permanent change, especially if it's something that you've done many times over your lifetime. And especially for we women, hormones will also affect our resting energy expenditure. And we'll get into some of those common myths in a moment about exactly how those hormones affect it. to some extent, the hormones affect it for men as well. But hormonally, men are a little bit more simple. So yeah, the hormones, there's sort of two main ones that we think about, right? We think about the thyroid, and there's a lot of myths around the thyroid. So somebody who is hypothyroid or has a low functioning thyroid, that does decrease your resting energy expenditure. And restoring proper thyroid function by taking the adequate or appropriate amount of thyroid hormone can help. But I see a lot of people who get on thyroid hormone and think that they need more. Well, I'm not losing any weight, so my dose must need to be adjusted. I must need more of this hormone. Taking extra thyroid hormone above what you need doesn't cause any more weight loss, unfortunately. It just doesn't. And even a lot of doctors don't realize that. It's not a well-known fact, but if you are low thyroid, you want to restore your thyroid hormone to the perfect place. It's like Goldilocks. You don't want too much, you don't want too little, you want it to be just right. The other thing, though, that comes with low thyroid function is you often just don't feel good. You're tired, your brain is foggy, your joints and muscles are achy, you're just not feeling good. So, and those symptoms also impact weight management because you're less likely to move and do your physical exercise. You're more likely to choose comfort foods or larger portions or things like that. So yes, we need to get your thyroid hormone right, but we also need to address all those symptoms that come with it. And sometimes just restoring the thyroid hormone to the right place doesn't address those other symptoms. So we need to be looking at that whole picture. So thyroid hormone is not usually just a magic bullet, unfortunately. But if you are actually low, it certainly is important and can be helpful. The other one we think about is estrogen, right? And as we go through, especially as we go through menopause and our bodies change. So I put this in bold because there's a lot of myths around there. Estrogen does not cause weight gain. There have been lots and lots of studies that have looked at this. In a way, it's actually the reverse, that loss of estrogen that happens at menopause can contribute to weight gain in a way. So in a couple of ways it does that. When we have estrogen, when we're in our 20s and 30s and we have plenty of estrogen, if we do carry extra weight, we're more likely to carry it in our hips and our thighs. That's what estrogen does, is it tends to deposit the weight in those areas if we have extra calories to spare.
Kelly,
yeah.
I have a question that,
Yeah.
or maybe a comment. So is that estrogen decline in our bodies sort of is it on a decline as the older we get, we have less and less estrogen?
Yes, but it's not quite a smooth slope usually. So normally in our younger years, through our teens and 20s and 30s, every month it's cycling, right? It's going up and down. As we get into usually our 40s for most women, the spikes get a little bit higher and lower, and things get a little bit more extreme in that perimenopausal stage. And then as we get into, especially the sort of 2 years on either side of actual menopause, that's when things tend to be the most extreme. And then it goes down fairly quickly after menopause. It just drops right down.
And that's when we get those little hairs on our chinny chin.
Sometimes, yes. So yeah, as it drops down there and gets quite low, then without having that estrogen, if you are carrying extra weight, it's going to tend to go to your belly and not to your hips and thighs the same way it did when you were younger. So estrogen doesn't cause weight gain. Estrogen alters where you hold the weight if you have extra. Yeah. It also, especially if levels are changing, especially in that sort of perimenopausal time, again, it affects how you feel. You might not be sleeping very well. You might be having hot flashes. You might be stiff and sore. You might be really moody and cranky and grumpy. So you might not be doing the same movement that you would be. You might be making different food choices. You might be all of these things. So, and I wrote there, the 4 years that kind of straddle menopause, so sort of 2 on either side, that's when we get those most rapid changes in body composition, where you're changing where you are depositing fat if you have it. You're losing that muscle tissue very quickly unless you are taking steps to prevent it. And then many of those symptoms tend to be the most intense in that time period. Afterwards, we do tend to sort of stabilize a little bit and find a better place. Um, but that's kind of the estrogen conundrum. So the only hormone out there that is actually proven to contribute to weight gain is the progestin only hormone contraceptives and medications. So things like the mini pill, the Depo-Provera shots, any of those that are a man-made progestin only, those do have some contribution to weight gain, but the like combined oral contraceptives and hormone replacement therapy that's done at menopause, it would be more a matter of if they make you feel bad, you're more likely to gain weight. If they make you
Kelly,
feel good, you're more likely to lose weight.
there's a question in the chat. What is
Okay.
the daily recommendation for exercise/strength training per day to maintain current function or improve function?
Oh, that's a hard one because it's so different for everybody.
Individual,
It's
right?
very individual. I would, and it depends, yeah, on your age, your health. I would say if you're a generally healthy person who doesn't have any, um, serious injuries or restrictions, that strength training 2 to 3 times a week, and on those alternate days doing something that's more of a cardiovascular thing like walking or cycling or swimming or something. But that's a super general recommendation, um, just for a sort of average healthy person. If you've had any kind of surgeries or serious injuries, or you have things like diabetes or cardiovascular disease, that may be different.
I've noticed that I have, I'm walking a lot, so a lot more than I normally did. But when we were at Calvin, we did strength training too, every
Mm-hmm.
second day, so to speak, or not, or more.
Yeah.
But I've noticed that I'm sitting more because I'm on the computer. I've been thinking about getting a stand-up, modifying my desk because it's all that sitting.
Yeah.
After you get started, you're supposed to get up every 20 minutes, but it doesn't always work out that way.
Yeah.
But I'm actually thinking of adding more strength training to our online because uh, first of all, the membership is asking for that. And secondly, we used to do a lot of squats.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, people are walking uphill and downhill, and all those things count as well, correct?
Yes, those things do count, but certainly doing something that's sort of strength specific, because there is a lot of things that you can do at home without a lot of equipment, right? You're right, the
Yeah.
squats and the lunges, and even just getting, some water bottles or some cans of soup or something to do some more upper body things.
Yeah.
Because the walking can be great for the lower body, but we don't get that upper body strength when we're just walking or cycling or swimming or any of those things, right?
A lot of people are pole walking. No, Kelly, that should add
Okay.
something, eh?
Yes, that would help for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, there's the hormone story. So and then other factors that contribute. And one thing that we don't like to we don't like to acknowledge, but as far as our weight and how we carry weight and our and whatnot, genetics is actually a pretty big factor. So if you look at your parents, you have a pretty good chance of looking like one or the other of them. And there's not a lot you can do about the genetics out there. So that is certainly a factor. Certain medications also can absolutely contribute to weight gain or weight loss. And some of the most well-known, the antidepressants, so things like, Paxil and Prozac and Cipralex and Zoloft and Effexor and all of those, do tend to cause some weight gain in a lot of people. The antipsychotics absolutely are really bad for this. That's things like Seroquel or Abilify, or some of those. They're often used for antipsychotics. They're talked about things like schizophrenia, but they're often used for depression and anxiety as well, or for sleep disorders in people. So they are used more commonly than you would think, given that they're antipsychotics. Steroids too, especially oral steroids, so prednisone. Most people aren't on prednisone for a long period of time because it has so many other side effects. But there are certain conditions where you're on a low dose of prednisone for quite some time, and that can definitely contribute. and even sometimes some of the inhaled steroids. So people who are on, an inhaler for asthma every day or whatever, that can have a small contribution as well. Not as much as the oral, but that's a factor. On the opposite side, stimulants are quite well known for causing weight loss, and that's things like your ADHD medications that are used commonly in children, right? Your Adderall and your Ritalin and your Concerta, and some of those tend to decrease appetite, and a lot of kids don't eat very much when they're on those, and they don't put on weight the way we'd like them to. Chemotherapy, of course, tends to wreak havoc on the digestive system. So there are a lot of other medical factors that can contribute. And then there's sort of this piece, and I think we kind of can come to a summary where I've touched on a few times in this, but when it comes to things like your energy, your sleep patterns, your stress, generally anything in your life that makes you feel bad makes it harder to maintain your weight. And anything that helps you feel better supports you to maintain a healthy weight. So if you're not sleeping well, you're probably, again, less likely to move your body and do the exercise. You're probably less likely to make good food choices. If you're stressed out, same thing. If your energy is low, same thing. So a lot of the work that I do with people as well is around what are all of these other factors and how do we get you feeling good so that then you can do the exercise that you know you should be doing, and that you can make good healthy food choices and feel good about it. Because if you're not sleeping, how are you going to do all of that? Or if you're going through menopause and you're having crazy hot flashes, how are you going to do all of that? Or if you're just so fatigued, how are you going to do that? So that's another big piece of what I do, aside from just talking about protein and calories and fat and whatnot. So yeah, look, I thought I had tons to say on this, but we're actually doing really well. So I imagine this is probably a topic with a lot of questions. I've not been good at looking at the chat. Oh, I see something here about a diet based on blood type from Anna. Yeah,
Can
the
you,
blood type diet is interesting, Anna. If you actually look at those, all four of those diets, the A, the B, the O, the AB, you'll notice right off that they're all healthy diets. None of them say you should be eating potato chips and McDonald's burgers. None of them. Is there any validity on, the type O's having more meat and the type A's having a more vegetarian diet? I've played around with it with patients. I haven't looked at the research recently on it, so I will say I'm not really up to date on it. I found that I think it came down to how people felt again. So I certainly had some people who were type A's who didn't like a vegetarian diet. They just didn't enjoy it. And so they had trouble sticking to it. But if they were a person who liked that diet, they were all healthy diets. So I don't know if that quite answers your question. I think that it's not a bad thing to try. But if you look at it and you say, oh, I've always eaten a mostly vegetarian diet, but I'm a type O and it says I should be eating mostly meat and vegetables, and I hate that, it's probably not going to be a good diet. Any other
yeah,
questions?
I was going to say we've been looking at blue zone communities, and they are recommending, that, Mediterranean, people who are living to be over 100 and living well. And so I like to think of Women as a blue zone community, because we're outdoors and we're active and learning, and they recommend a Mediterranean diet,
Mm-hmm.
which is less red meat, more like a lot of vegetables and fruits.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
well, you know
Yeah.
more about that than I do, but and eating, leaving, not leaving food on your plate, but eating less. We've been kind of led into bigger plates.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at plates that your mother, if you have your mom's dishes, go pull them out of the cupboard, because the plates were a lot smaller.
Yeah.
And little things like that. And
Yeah.
eating your biggest meal in the morning. Well, I don't know if I could do that. But where our culture is, our big meals in the evening, right? Any
Mm-hmm.
comments on that, Kelly? Or
Yeah, a couple things. The Mediterranean diet, I think, yeah, is really important. So I was talking today sort of specifically to weight loss, right? And said that
Yeah.
when you talk about weight loss in particular, and if all calories being equal, then the diet doesn't matter, which is true from a purely weight loss standpoint. If we look at what's the best diet for preventing cardiovascular disease, what's the best diet for preventing dementia and Alzheimer's, what's the best diet
Yeah.
for
Do you want
general
to
health
bring
and
some coffee?
longevity, what's the best
Want to bring
for
some coffee or anything?
diabetes. The Mediterranean diet scores about the highest on just about all of those other things. So, in terms of health, not only weight loss, the Mediterranean diet is probably one of the best for most people. Again, there are individual things, and different people have different needs, but as a general rule, when I'm looking at overall health, I do try to encourage people to go towards a more Mediterranean diet. And as you were saying, yeah, it's less red meat, it's smaller portions of the animal proteins. When you are choosing animal proteins, it's more fish, it's more poultry. It's got good portions of vegetable proteins like legumes, like lentils and chickpeas and different kinds of beans. It's got more, it does have some grains, but it's also got lots of fruits and vegetables, lots of olive oil, and not so much of the other kinds of fats. Um, Nuts and seeds, certainly. And less processed foods and things, and yeah, for just general overall health, the Mediterranean diet is probably one of the best out there.
Yeah.
And then what else? There was something else you were saying that I was going to talk to too, and now I've lost that train.
Oh, don't ask me to remember. Oh, wait a minute.
Okay.
I have a
The other
question,
thing,
Marion.
sorry, go ahead, Dorothy.
You mentioned protein as one of the macro nutrients, and I was wondering if people think that that's a good thing if you can overdo it, and what's the best source of protein? I think we all know legumes, but
Not necessarily the best. I would say that again, it depends on the person, right? So legumes are a source of protein. Legumes are not a complete protein though, because you need to pair your legumes with a grain. So you need to have beans with rice or something in order for it to be a complete protein. So if you can do that regularly, that's great. Also, if you can digest them well, that's great. But there are people who have digestive issues who don't digest legumes very well. So I don't think there's a best, but legumes are a good source. Certainly, animal protein is a very rich source, right? Meat and fish and poultry and eggs are high in protein. So again, if people can do well on them, that is a good source as well. Dairy products do have a lot of protein. Some people don't digest dairy products very well at all, and for them, it wouldn't be good. So yeah, it depends on, knowing your body, knowing your digestive system, whatnot. And I also think variety is important. If you have a digestive system that can tolerate the variety, having a variety of those different protein foods, so that you're getting all the other micronutrients, which we really didn't talk about today as well. You're getting iron, you're getting zinc, you're getting B vitamins, you're getting all of those other things that are important too.
and can you get too much protein?
Yeah, absolutely. As I was saying, it's hard because to eat that much protein, it would just be a large quantity of food, and a lot of people wouldn't enjoy that. But you certainly can get too much protein, and it would be more people who are really trying to bulk up and are really trying to eat protein, or people who just are, like their big steak with nothing else with it.
Okay, thanks.
But yes, you can overdo the protein, and it can be hard on the kidneys if you have too much protein. And it can also cause a lot of constipation, because when you have that much protein, you're usually not having much else, and you're not getting the fiber in there to balance it out.
Can I ask a question, please? It's Debbie.
Yes. Yes.
I'd just be curious to know what your opinion is of intermittent fasting.
Yeah, and that again is a very sort of popular thing right now, right? As far as I think it comes back to again this concept of how you feel. So I definitely know some people who who do really well with intermittent fasting, and especially if they're, diabetic or insulin resistant or having some of those things, having that longer fast time gives their body time to bring those insulin levels down. But then I have other people who are doing intermittent fasting and who are exhausted all the time, and their bodies just need fuel a little bit more often. That having that long fast is just too long. So I think it's a really individual thing. It can be a good tool. I think it needs to be tempered. Like the people who are doing sort of 20-hour fasts and 4-hour eating windows, I don't think is healthy. If it's more sort of a 16 and 8 or something like that, that's a little bit more balanced, that can certainly be a good tool for people. If you're doing intermittent fasting and you're not eating until noon and you're finding that you're dragging yourself through the day with no energy at all, maybe you're not a good candidate for it. But especially, if you're diabetic, insulin resistant, something along those lines, it certainly seems to be a powerful tool for some of those people. But yeah, I would again pay attention. If it makes you feel better, great. If it makes you feel worse, then you're not a good candidate for that.
I know you talked about metabolism, Kelly, but just could you talk a little bit more about, with increased activity, you're going to probably burn more calories even without changing your diet?
Yeah, absolutely. So that does come back to sort of that simple math, right? That anytime your body's moving, it needs energy to move. So the more you move, the more calories you're using just in that movement. And then the other piece with it is that if you're doing any sort of movement that's increasing your strength and increasing your muscle mass, you're going to be over time increasing that resting metabolic rate or that resting energy expenditure, just because then you have more muscle that is also using calories. So exercise and movement sort of is twofold, that you're burning the calories in the moment, and if you're also increasing your muscle mass, then you're going to be setting yourself up for burning more down the road too.
Okay. And
And
any comments any comments on interval training? Because I've been thinking about adding 10 minutes before we start with our speaker, at 8:30 for at least once or one more time a week, just to get in. I know a little bit about interval training and it is effective, but it's nice to hear it from somebody else.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, a lot of the research shows that the interval training is a really effective way to, again, increase that energy expenditure, both in the moment as well as sort of a resting energy expenditure, because it does often increase strength. It also, just from a psychological point of view, is easier for a lot of people to think, okay, well, I'm doing 10 minutes, but only 30 seconds is hard, and then I get a rest, right? Versus I'm doing 10 minutes of really hard work. That can be hard to wrap your head around and a little bit daunting to actually do. Whereas you think, okay, I'm getting some rests in there. I find that just from a compliance point of view, right, it makes it easier for people to do it, all science aside of how helpful it is.
Yeah.
And the other piece as well is that we know that our bodies thrive on change and difference. So if you are doing a half-hour walk around your neighborhood every day and you do that for 20 years, great, you're getting out, you're doing your walk, but you would get more benefit if you changed it up every now and then, because after the first month or so, your body's going to be pretty well adapted to that, and that's going to be pretty easy. And so intervals, any sort of interval training is a nice way to introduce that change into somebody's plan. Again, in a fairly easy way. I find it hard if I'm sitting with a patient and say, okay, we need to, increase the intensity of your exercise a little bit. I want you to go out, and somebody who's never run before, and I want you to go run for 5 kilometers 3 times a week. Well, that's not going to happen, right? It just isn't going to happen. People aren't going to do that. And they'd probably end up injured if they did anyway. But I can say to somebody, okay, well, you have this walking route that you do, right? Now let's put some little intervals in there, or sometimes I call them bursts, some little bursts where you're walking along at your normal pace, and then you see that, there's a stop sign that's just down the road, half a block or whatever. I want you to walk as fast as you can to that stop sign, and then go back to your normal pace, let your heart rate come down, and then do it again. So I'd certainly find that it's something that people can much more easily put into their lives as well. And that can be organized the way you're thinking of, or it can be sort of, yeah, oh, I'm out for my walk, I'm going to do some little bursts or some little sprints in there. So yeah, I love love. I have a love-hate relationship with interval training. I've been doing some training myself for a ski race right now, and so my coach has me doing a lot of intervals. And at the end of the workout, sometimes I'm cursing a bit, but they are very effective.
I'm thinking of adding, let's just say 3 sets of squats and then an upper body or, in between so that we can still continue.
Yeah.
And it would just be an interval training that might make a difference. And I thought it might, because it's just a matter of time and the amount of time we're on Zoom too, you know. So I figure if I can get started at 8:30, I wonder if anybody else could for 10 minutes. Oh, I see a few hands going up. Okay. So maybe that's something, same as we do on Thursdays. Okay, good. So you'll need to have your weights handy and we'll try that out. Let's see.
I have another question, or
Sure, go, Dorothy.
when I go for some of my walks, when I get home, I eat 3 squares a day. But sometimes when I get home, I am so hungry. I have an appetite like a lumberjack. And I don't know if that's a thing or it's just me being Miss Piggy.
No, I think hunger is an important cue that a lot of us don't pay enough attention to in the world. So that if you're hungry, you should probably be eating, and it might be all sorts of things. It might be, depending on how long your walk was, you might have burned through more energy than you'd eaten at your meal, and so you might need actually more.
But I want to lose weight.
Well, in that case, there's
I know I'm being silly.
but yeah, I would certainly say, listening to that, and maybe not for you, but for other people, if that's a factor, are their meals actually big enough? What about the timing of when they're eating their meals compared to when they're doing their walks? What about those macros? Are they having enough protein? Are they having enough fat? Are they having enough carbohydrates, or does their body need something different? And yeah, the timing is really important as well. And, Debbie's question about intermittent fasting, I didn't really talk about the timing of actual meals, and that some people need to have something first thing in the morning and other people can get away with not, and that their energy levels or their hunger levels or different things will be affected by that depending on when you actually eat as well. So yes, if you're hungry, I would say you should eat something. And I thought I saw Mary Lynn had raised her hand there for a moment. Mary Lynn, do you still have a question?
Yeah, I was just kind of wondering, I raised my hand for Harriet. Yes, I'd love the interval.
Okay.
But also my question, I've been seeing on news clips this eat like a bear thing where you're eating a huge big salad. And my understanding was maybe only once a day. So, and I'm sure the salad, it looks like it has avocado and eggs and all of everything else, but tons of greens. And I'm wondering if that's a good thing or, what you think of it.
I've not seen that. I'm not sure that bears eat a lot of salad, to be honest. But,
no, me either. I thought they ate a lot of bugs.
yeah. For most people, again, kind of with that intermittent fasting thing, for most people, 1 meal a day is not enough.
No.
It's really hard to get the calories that you need in 1 meal. And then it's hard for your body to digest and utilize that then for the whole next 24 hours. So there's probably the occasional person out there who would do okay with that. But for the average person, I would think at least 2 meals a day is needed. And yeah, absolutely. Greens and avocado and eggs and things are absolutely good foods. But just to do something like that once a day, I'm not sure would really be a very effective long-term plan.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Kelly, as usual, very thorough. Thank you so much. Well, I really appreciate all your comments, and it's a refresher for a lot of us. Because I think if you are maintaining your weight, you're doing something right.
Absolutely.
And you're happy with that weight.
And especially if you feel good while you're doing it, right?
Yeah. So, and you've kind of prompted me to move to one little extra. We'll try 10 minutes on Mondays. How about that? We'll start there and see. And so we have Monday and Thursday, chair yoga Tuesday, Wednesday, Zumba, and walking if you want to walk. And by the way, some of these ladies are walking like an hour and a half to 2 hours.
Wow.
They get lost once in a while, right, guys? But they're strong women, and it makes me feel so good to know that we are in the blue zone. So thank you very much, Kelly. And I love when you come on, and I'll keep asking you. You just have to say no once in a while if you have to.
Well, thank you for having me.
Just everyone, just to let you know that Kelly is Earth in a Nest business and is committed to eco-age friendly practices. So her information is on earthinanest.ca. All her contact information is there. All you have to do is click on her logo and you go right to her website.